Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of High Energy Girl. And today we have, for a second time, David Krantz, who is a certified epigenetic coach and sought after expert on individualized nutrition and peak performance. David is best known for developing a test in collaboration with Epigenetic that helps people understand their unique response to cannabis. He was nominated in 2019 as a top 100 health innovator by the International Forum for Healthcare Advancement, and in 2020 launched a comprehensive training program on cannabis genetics for health practitioners. A lifelong musician, David sees the various systems of the body as parts of a complex symphony and has a passion for helping clients fine-tune those parts to create harmonious health. I am super excited to speak to him about the endocannabinoid system in our body. It's new to me. And so let's just go say hi to David. Hey everyone, welcome to High Energy Girl, a podcast helping women to age stronger because it is never too late to get fit, be strong, and feel sexy. I'm your host, Tracy Gluhite, health coach and personal trainer and founder of highenergygirl.com. Each week, we will either have a guest interview, which will provide you encouragement or an actionable tip to help you age stronger, or I will do a solo episode. Please also join our awesome Facebook group called High Energy Girls, and I'm looking forward to see you on the inside of that group and hope you enjoy today's show. Give a woman a fish, feed her for a day. Teach a woman to fish, feed her for a lifetime. Teach a woman to fish, end world hunger. Have you ever wanted to help people improve their health journey? Have you thought about coaching people with a keto lifestyle? Would you like to become an integrative health coach? Well, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN as we call it, is the largest nutrition school in the country. And in 2011, I graduated from their program and became a health coach. It was completely awesome. We learned over 100 different dietary theories and talk about craziness and confusion. My wish for you is that we can lock arms and create a tribe of health coaches all around the country, all around the world to spread the keto message. If this resonates with you and you would like to look into this option deeper, please go to my blog at highenergygirl.com and click on the link to the right of the homepage. Here you can grab the curriculum guide and see if it inspires you. Since I care so much about my listeners, I negotiated the very best tuition rate for you at IIN. Either you can contact them directly and give them my name, or I will introduce you to a counselor so you can decide if this is a good fit for you and your career goals. Let me know how I can support you in this coaching career opportunity. Hey, David, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, Tracy, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's good to talk with you. So for the listeners that don't yet know you, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. So I am an epigenetic coach, meaning I help people understand their bodies through genetics and how to create optimal genetic expression by putting the right foods in your body, putting the right supplements, using the right herbs, and also looking at emotional health and relationships and all of these other things that we could consider part of our environment, and what's happening both internally and externally that changes the way our genes express. And so that's what I do with clients, is really help them understand how to create longevity and good energy, and really just focus on things from the deepest layers we can, which are at this time, genetics and epigenetics.
Yeah, that's cool. A lot of people don't even know what epigenetics is. So why don't you tell them what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's a good reason why most people don't know what that means, is because it's a pretty new understanding in science. When I was in high school, I was taught that the genetic code is something that's fixed and something that doesn't change. And that is true. And yet over the past 20 to 30 years, we've really understood that there's another layer to that. And that's what people call epigenetics, which is what turns on or off the expression of different genes in response to the environment. And this means that what the things that you're putting in your body change the way your genes express. And when I say express, that means, they might create different neurochemicals, they might create different hormones, they might create the conditions that allow you to build muscle or gain weight, right? If you're doing one thing versus the other, your body is trying to adapt and respond. And it turns out that your genes are actually one of the central hubs that sense that energy, sense what's going on in the environment, and make these changes to allow you to adapt and be dynamic. And so, it's no one's fault if they don't know what epigenetics is. It is a really new understanding, and even a lot of doctors that are practicing, it has not filtered into that understanding yet.
Of course, maybe because there's not a pill to counter the symptom, a pharmaceutical pill that is. So that would be why they don't talk about it.
Yes, although I will say there are a lot of the pharmaceutical mechanisms of action are happening on the epigenetic level, and this is something like, for example, like the for SSRIs, the most commonly prescribed psychiatric medication, like they used to think that the reason why it worked was because of the way it impacted serotonin. Now they believe a lot of the reason why it works for some people, it's still got a really pretty low success rate overall, but the reason why it does make changes is because of the way it causes epigenetic changes in something called histones in the brain. And so a lot of the things that we know are good for you, exercise, eating a certain way, the underlying mechanisms for change are actually happening at the epigenetic level. A lot of drugs, a lot of supplements, a lot of herbs. There's this, we can point to the top level kind of biochemical changes, but those are actually, in a lot of cases, being controlled by these deeper epigenetic mechanisms.
Interesting. So what have you been working on lately? What's new and good?
Yeah, so I have been over the last couple years working on a genetic panel that helps people understand their response to cannabis and different cannabinoids. And so last September, I released that in collaboration with Apeiron Genomics, and we released this training program that helps practitioners learn all about how different genetic variants can help predict positive or negative responses to THC and CBD. And so I've been pretty busy putting together that training program and putting that out there. Um, and I've, at the same time, believe it or not, also been part-time in school getting a mental health counseling degree.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I've been really focusing in on the psycho-emotional aspects of health as well, and really bridging the gap between the physiological and then the internal emotional wellness side of things too.
Oh wow. When are you going to be finished with that?
I'll be finished in a year and a half or so.
So I'm really interested in this whole endocannabinoid thing because it's fairly newly accepted. Would you agree?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, it again is really a system that's only been discovered and validated since the 90s.
Okay. Well, I don't even think it's hit mainstream yet. Like most people would have no clue. So why don't you start off by just explaining a little bit about that and why you're curious about that?
Sure. So the endocannabinoid system describes a regulatory system in the body that functions using molecules that are similar to ones that the cannabis plant creates. So most people listening probably know that THC is this molecule in cannabis that gets you high and is what is responsible for the psychoactive effects, right? So it's a specific molecule that is shaped in this particular way, and the structure is what allows it to create the psychoactive effect. Well, it turns out that THC is not the only cannabinoid, and humans and lots of other mammals actually create their own endocannabinoids that function in the body to control other systems. And this is why it is such an important thing to be aware of is the pervasive effect the endocannabinoid system has on all of the other parts of the body. So the musculoskeletal system, the nervous system, the neurotransmitters, neurotransmission, synapses, immune system function, all of these kind of plug into the endocannabinoid system. And you can almost think about it that the endocannabinoid system is a more ancient system that a lot of these other more commonly known systems in the body are actually built on top of.
Mm.
And actually, um, in some cases, it seems the endocannabinoid system is kind of a primary control system that can really change the function of, for example, our neurochemistry or hormones, things like that. And so the endocannabinoid system is describing the receptors that we have in our body that are sensitive to cannabinoids. So they're sensitive to THC and CBD from other things from the cannabis plant, but they're also sensitive to the cannabinoids that our body makes on our own without any input from cannabis or other plants like that. So we're creating these endocannabinoids that attach to these receptors and then kind of control other systems in the body. And that's one of the reasons it's so exciting, is because it just gives you this really deep way of influencing health and influencing other areas of function.
So, what would a person do to enhance that system?
Mhm. Right. So it depends on which direction you're trying to push it, right? Because like so many other things, it's not just a one size fits all approach. There are certain traits and certain symptoms that are associated with what they call low endocannabinoid tone or overactive endocannabinoid tone. So you can either be kind of pushed out of balance in one direction, you might have
Uh,
too little cannabinoid activation, or actually too much in certain cases. Um, and so part of what you kind of want to know is, am I someone that's going to be trending towards this lower function, or am I on the higher side? And that's actually what the genetic test that we developed really can help understand. Um, Now, the nice thing is that CBD tends to be kind of like an adaptogen in a way. Like in the right amounts, it can actually bring down an overactive endocannabinoid tone, but in other situations, can actually bring up too little. So, CBD is really a primary way of balancing things. But there's other herbs and there's other things that influence it. Omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are really important because the body's cannabinoids that it makes are actually made out of omega-6 fatty acids. Um, and so what they found is that um, for people that are struggling with obesity, getting the right omega-6 and omega-3 balance will not only change like the actual weight, but it changes the endocannabinoid balance. And that seems to be one of the central things that actually causes changes in weight in obesity when you change the omega-6 to 3 is the endocannabinoids, right? So there's um, there's the fatty acids, there's a couple other herbs like maca that can be useful in certain situations. So it's actually not just about the cannabis plant. There's other plants in nature that will also work on this system as well.
Interesting. So, now with the omega 3, omega 6 ratio,
Mhm.
when they're ingesting, I have found that most people get plenty of omega 6 just on their regular
Right.
diet, but it's omega 3 that they're lacking. Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
I would agree with that. And what you'll see, what they found in the research is that um, people that are obese tend to have excess endocannabinoids, and they also tend to have excess omega-6s. And the people that tend to get benefits from the omega-3s in weight reduction also show the normalization of the endocannabinoids as well at the same time. And so, yeah, I would totally agree with that, that it's really, the omega-6s tend to be the overconsumptive culprit, and then
Mm-hmm.
the omega-3s tend to balance them out. But what I have found is that there are certain people that don't respond that well to omega-3s because they're actually, that's not actually out of balance, and there's other reasons for, obesity and other things like that. And so looking at the endocannabinoid system can kind of give you an indication of, hey, is this one of the things we need to be paying attention to or not?
Now, what about, okay, so I have a lot of questions right now. So let's stick with the omega 3, and then I want to talk about like thyroid.
Hmm.
So omega 3, can you get too much? Like if a person was like a pescatarian and ate a lot of fish, is it possible to get too much omega 3?
There it is like you want to have the balance. Your body uses omega 6s for certain things that are equally as important. And we put a lot of emphasis on omega 3s in the past 10, 15, 20 years because the Western diet is so out of balance, right? We're so overfed on omega 6s that for most people, omega 3s are going to be the thing. But certainly you can have a deficiency in omega 6s if you really, are very, very strict and don't eat any at all. So it's about the balance.
Okay. Is it like 2 to 1? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 1 to 4 to 1 is about and when you look at blood levels, most Americans are a big, more than 20 to 1 of
Ooh,
omega 6 to omega 3. So,
interesting. Awesome. So, what made you get interested in this whole endocannabinoid system?
hmm so I've been interested in cannabis my whole life. I'm one of those people that when I was a kid, first time I smelled weed, I was like, what is this? This is like, the light of God has shined down and the smell is magnificent. So I've just always had, a an attunement to it. And but at the same time, that isn't the reason why I got interested in the endocannabinoid system. I was doing a lot of work with genetically guided nutrition and nutrigenetics and helping people understand a lot of other facets around epigenetics and nutrition. And I came across a couple studies that were looking at genetic variants in the endocannabinoid system. And I realized I hadn't seen any of this anywhere. There was no one talking about it. There was not really much public information available that was outside of the really difficult to understand studies on PubMed and the peer-reviewed research that you have to sit there and sift through for hours to understand what people are talking about. And so I kind of made it my mission to really dive into that and understand it and help people, navigate it in a way that could be useful. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that there was all this information looking at the endocannabinoid system from a genetic perspective that was pretty untapped. And a lot of it was looking at it from an addiction standpoint or from a problematic use standpoint, because that's what you can get funding for.
Mm.
And there weren't very many people, there wasn't really hardly anyone looking at it from a how can we use this to improve health standpoint? How can we use this to actually give people information about their bodies that can be useful and actionable and lead to positive change? And that kind of lit a fire under me to really take that information and do something with it, because it was very obvious to me that I was looking at it when I was looking at it, that it was not being done justice in the way, in the accessibility or the usability of it. So spent the last couple of years really figuring out, what's the best way for people to get benefit from the raw science and translating that into a test and a training and a report that, anyone who's listening can get and understand their bodies better.
So, why do you think there's no funding for it?
Oh, well, I mean, the drug war and the general attitude towards psychoactive plants has been extremely backwards and extremely problematic, and um, for really for the past 100 years, but it's really ramped up uh, since Reagan, in the past 35 years in terms of clamping down on drug use and treating it as a criminal activity rather than a health issue for people that have addictive problems, and assuming that all people that use uh, drugs or psychoactive substances are criminals, right? So the funding has not been there to look at anything except look at it from any angle except criminality and problematic behavior, right? So and that's one side of it. And then on the other side of it, there is the pharmaceutical industry that, has a major hold on the research funding and the ability for private funding to do studies, right? And so you take that, and anything that's a natural plant just tends to get brushed aside and not really given the credibility unless someone's trying to patent a molecule, from it,
Exactly.
right? So,
Exactly. And you know, I
so
was
you,
on
you
a
put the
website.
together.
I was on a website the other day and I was like just looking about like cancer, and they were talking about like how cannabis is really good for that. Um, and I didn't dive deep into it, but it was talking about how it's so healing too for like different cancers and different things. Now, I don't know how or why or any of the details, but I just know that, you know, that's something that they said. And I believe, I think there was a whole series about cannabis and cancer where it was like plant to plant, juice to plant, you know, all that stuff. I don't know how that works. Do you?
Well, there's a lot of anti-tumor activity from THC and other cannabinoids. And I'll also say this, just to give people a marker or a point on the map in terms of where we're at, is, there have been over 100 cannabinoids in the cannabis plant that have been identified. Like we know they exist, we know what their structure is. We know what about 4 to 6 of them do decently well. We really know what 2 of them do like really well at this point, right? So that's THC and CBD. But there's hundreds of other ones that have not been
Mm.
really parsed out in terms of their activity in the body. And when we're talking about different types of cancer, it is very likely that there will be other cannabinoids that we will understand what they do that will be very useful for specific types because cancer is not a uniform thing, right? There's many different types. What works for one type doesn't work for another. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that have had success with THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids. So, and especially when you look at things in animal models and all that, like there's some pretty exciting data in that department for sure.
That's awesome. So what would a listener who's curious about all of that, what would their first step be?
Well, it depends what their goals are. I would say for someone who just wants to know about, hey, is this going to be something that works well for me? Doing the genetic test that I've created would be a great start. It will give you an understanding of is THC something that's safe for you? There are certain side effects and complications that are pretty rare, but at the same time, it's worth knowing about. And it can give you some guidance on dosage, right? If you're just getting into cannabinoids, you want to be pretty careful about not doing too much too fast, especially if you're using THC in something that's psychoactive. And so the test that I've developed can really help you understand, am I someone that's going to be a really strong responder, or am I going to be someone that can probably tolerate a higher amount? And so that can be a useful tool to start out with. And the other thing, is to experiment and do it in a way where you're being systematic about it, and keeping a log. That's what a lot of people have found success with is actually tracking like, okay, I did 5 drops of this that day and I have felt this way, because if you just are not keeping track, it's much harder to kind of figure out what's working and what isn't. Um, but yeah, I'm a proponent of the testing just because it gives you a foundation of knowledge to work from.
Yeah, I think that's cool because I'll tell you, I haven't done the THC in a very, very, very long time. Like we're talking
Mhm.
high school because I was like, I didn't like the way it made me feel. And
Mhm.
so now I'm afraid. But the whole CBD thing I think is really cool and interesting. But I've just never been consistent with it. So if you were to say, um, as far as the THC versus the CBD, is one more healing than the other? Or if you're just like me, like 55 years old, a lot of my listeners are women over 50. Um, would you say that one or the other has a benefit, or would we just need to know based on the test results?
I would say, CBD is probably going to be more universal. There's much less of a chance of having like a negative response, subjectively, like feeling weird from it, not feeling good. There tends to be much less downside. THC can be a little riskier in terms of needing to be in, the right setting and um, too much too fast can sometimes not lead to good results, but it can also be really fun for people, and And at the same time, it works really well for certain things like neurological pain and other types of pain, and um, sometimes really helps people with sleep as well.
The
So
THC or the CBD?
THC tends to be helpful for sleep, and there is a synergistic action between the two as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Like you'll like very often, and this is something they call the entourage effect, where multiple cannabinoids together tend to have a balancing effect on each other, and you tend to see better results with treating different symptoms when there's a broader spectrum of cannabinoids together. So, just like a CBD isolate tends to be harder to dose right, tends to be, there's more room for error. But if you get something that has like an extract that has a little bit of THC in
Mm.
it, it tends to usually be a little bit more useful, more usable for people.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I live in California, so all that stuff's legal here. There's dispensaries and stuff. And here's a funny story. So, one of my good friends, her and her husband, I can't remember, it was like a special occasion, maybe their anniversary or something. And so they went to the dispensary and got some edibles.
Hmm.
And I don't know exactly what they got, but I think it was kind of like a candy. And she said that I don't know how much they had, but she said they basically sat there and looked at the television for like an hour, just like a blank expression. And I was like, she's like, oh boy, I had way too much. It was so funny.
Uh-huh.
We were cracking up.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is that the edibles often is really where people get hung up. And they're very popular because you don't have to inhale them. They seem like something that's going to be an easier, safer option. But the margin for error with edibles is pretty big. And that's one of the real strengths of this test that I've developed is looking at orally ingested THC and CBD, because what it's looking at is these liver enzymes that break down THC. And some people tend to break down THC really well. And those are the people that can eat, an edible and, feel pretty good. But then some people actually have a deficiency in these liver enzymes. And so a little bit of THC goes a really long way. And when you look at the peer-reviewed studies where they've given people, 30 people 10 milligrams of THC each, the difference in someone's blood levels when they measure them 15 minutes or an hour later can be up to 8 times different between different people. So
Oh,
depending on the way that your liver is processing THC, someone might get rocked by an edible and another person might be fine. So that's really one of those areas where, if you're kind of like, used it back in high school and you're curious about getting back into it, it's like you can just kind of skip the line and know, are you going to be on the lower end of the dosage range or the higher end, most likely, and prevent I took way too much and now I don't know if I want to use this again.
oh, that's hilarious. All right. Well, where can they get this test done? How can they find you? Tell me all the juicy details.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can go to my website, Krantz, Krantz, david-krantz.com, and you can send me a message directly, and we can chat about, how to do the test. It's a simple cheek swab genetic test. Send it off to our lab. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to process. And then we meet and have a 30-minute review session where we go through the results and I make sure that you understand everything and know, what's going to be the best actionable steps forward and ways to use the data. So anyone that's interested can either email me, I've got a form on my site, or you can actually book a free 30-minute consult if you want to get more details or talk more about the nutrition work and other things that I do as well.
Well, and you do a full comprehensive panel too. I mean, it's
Right.
not just the endocannabinoid system, but it's like everything so that people can get a comprehensive look at what they're starting with, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and there's the option to either just do the endocannabinoid or just do nutrition and detoxification. We can, customize it to what makes sense for you. But yeah, I do a full comprehensive look at different systems in the body and look at what are going to be the things that you can do to create optimal health at the genetic level.
Yeah, I need to go back to our old show. So any of the listeners, go back and listen to the last one. I think it was about 8 months ago. Mm-hmm. And you can hear a comprehensive look. I think you kind of reviewed mine. So I feel like now I want to go back and listen to it and make sure I'm like implementing everything that you suggested. So.
Right. And that's part of the process too, is, you take what you can, incorporate the first go around. And because there's so much information in those reports, you can keep just refining it and adding more over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, it was a pleasure seeing you again today and fun talking about a topic that I'm not really familiar with. So I have to say you kind of nerded me out a little bit. Some of that went over my head. So I'm going to listen again so I can really let it absorb and understand, because I know that the endocannabinoid system is supposed to be really important and often overlooked. And it sounds like if we're able to improve that, then we'll be able to improve other areas just as a natural repercussion or whatever.
Right, exactly. And, you can think about it very basically as a way for other systems in the body to communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. You can think about it as almost this underlying communication system that can help, say, the nervous system communicate with the musculoskeletal system, or the immune system communicate with your other organs in the body. And so you can think about these cannabinoids as chemical messengers that we can shift and change in order to really balance these other systems by kind of changing the way they're communicating with each other.
Yeah, optimize health for sure. I love it. All right. Well, it was good to see you and talk to you, and we're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, it's great chatting with you, Tracy.
Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Please go check out the show notes at highenergygirl.com/show. And make sure that you look David up over on Facebook or social media, and all links will be on the show notes page. Please let us know who else you would like to hear from on the High Energy Girl Show. Make it a great day. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion and I could be wrong.